UFC Fight Night, Cejudo versus Song goes down this weekend in Seattle. And man, oh man, at every turn, it seems like something is going wrong with UFC Seattle. We have fighters pulling out, last minute replacements, fights completely falling off of the card. We even have fights that weren't even supposed to be on this card that just got randomly added recently. So top to bottom though, this is a very solid card that the UFC put together here for UFC Seattle. I mean, the main event between Henry Cejudo and Song Yadong is a very intriguing matchup. And then in the co-main, we have an absolute banger at middleweight between Brennan Allen and Anthony Hernandez. We have Jean Silva on the card. And then now Jean Matsumoto, he was added to this card to take on Rob Font, which is going to be his toughest test to date for Matsumoto, that is. And just overall, man, this is a very solid card. We have some prospects on the rise. This has a little bit of everything. Super excited for this one. And this is going to be my full card breakdown along with a prediction for every single fight on the card. Let's hop into it, starting with the very first fight of the evening between Modestas Bukauskas and Rafael Cerqueira. This is an interesting fight here at light heavyweight because while I think Modestas Bukauskas is a guy that is starting to show signs of getting his footing under him, right? He's a guy that came over into the UFC, goes out there, gets the decision win over Tyson Pedro, goes out there, beats Zach Palga. These weren't exactly wow me type of performances, right? He's going out there and he is winning, right? Which is the good thing. But he was kind of not showing enough to me, right? And because when you watch Modestas fight, he's a big guy, he's powerful, he's got big power in his hands, and he has those heavy strikes with everything that he throws, and he does have good submissions in his back pocket. So I had, I guess, maybe higher expectations than what he was showing us. And then he goes out there and gets slept by Vitor Petrino. And that just, it hasn't aged particularly well. Look, I know Vitor Petrino is a tough opponent and he's a guy that has good power, but we've seen him get fraud check recently. Went out there, got submitted by Anthony Smith, then gets flatlined by Dustin Jacoby, but then he gets back in the win column, goes out there 6 months ago against Marcin Proknia and is able to find a submission. And that's where I'm like, look, that's the Modestas that I've wanted to see, a guy that could go out there and find the finish. And I think he's got a good matchup here in front of him with Rafael Cerqueira because Rafael on the regional scene, guy was 11-0 coming into the UFC, and what we've seen from him was finishes. Goes out there, gets a submission, he's throwing kicks to the body, finishing people, mixing up the boxing, blending it well with the kicks, and he is a very versatile guy on the feet who does have true power in the light heavyweight division. But I think he's kind of what he was fighting on the regional scene, there's a different level once you hit the UFC. And while I don't think that Modestas Bukauskas is Ibo Aslan, I think that Modestas possesses some similar attributes that are going to cause Rafael some issues in this fight. Because this fight here against Ibo Aslan, this was an absolute disaster for Rafael. I mean, he had absolutely no shot to get anything going. Aslan bull rushed him, backed him up against the fence, and just started letting those big ooga booga shots go, and was able to get him out of there. So, and again, Ibo Aslan, who's also on the card, by the way, he is a very dangerous guy. And if you do not have the answer and you come in and you're trying to kind of find your range and play all that kind of game, Ibo Aslan's just going to get in your face and get you out of there. So he showed that in this fight. Not a good look in the debut for Rafael. And again, that was his toughest fight to date, right? Because on the regional scene, his competition, wasn't as steep. But again, he's just fighting who these promotions put in front of him. But at the end of the day, I believe that what we have seen thus far, right, coming off of the loss to Ibo Aslan, again, Aslan's a good fighter, he's very dangerous, so I don't hold it too much against Rafael, but considering what we've seen from him in the UFC, that was the sample, right, him getting absolutely demolished. And then on the regional scene, yes, he was going out there and finishing people, but I think that Modestas Bukauskas is a guy that is really starting to find his groove, man, and I think he finds a finish in this fight. I'm going to say a second round TKO by Modestas. I think that his skill set is a little bit more rounded. He's over there training with Tom Aspinall and those guys, I believe now. I think he's starting to hit his stride, right? Comes into the UFC, and in your first fight or two, it's great to see a finish, but going out there and convincingly winning the fights or getting the W is the most important thing. That's what we've seen from Modestas thus far. Goes out there, gets the finish over Marcin Proknia. I like what we have seen thus far. He is improving, heading in the correct direction. But again, Modestas is a guy that can get finished, man. We've seen that in his career. He can be a guy that you can get to and finish him. So that's something that does concern me a little bit, considering that Rafael does have dangerous striking. But I believe that the overall skill set on the side of Modestas will be enough to get the job done here. And again, coming off of that Aslan, fight, I think Rafael's going to have a point to prove. I still think at this point in time, Modestas is the better fighter. Moving on, we have Nick Klein versus Mansour Abdul-Maik. This is an interesting fight here because I think Abdul-Maik is going to absolutely destroy Nick Klein. I was surprised when the UFC put this fight together because, look, Nick Klein, he's a guy coming off of the Contender Series here. Goes out there and gets, the submission over Souza. And I'm like, okay, showed us a little bit of something. But he's a guy that he's not particularly good on the feet. He's not very good on the feet. And what he kind of banks on is getting the fight to the floor and relying on his submission skills. He's got very, very good jiu-jitsu. And that's kind of what we've seen from him throughout his career, right? He goes out there, gets a decision over an LFA. And then, we've seen that he has very good submission skills on the regional scene. That is his bread and butter, is getting the takedowns, getting, to those positions to utilize his jiu-jitsu. But how are you going to do that against Abdul-Maik, man? When I watch Mansour Abdul-Maik, this guy is an absolute savage, man. On the regional scene, going out there, getting things done, fought over in Shogun, was able to get a TKO, goes out there, vicious ground and pound, and just, on the Contender Series, goes out there against Wes Schultz, and this is kind of what put him really on the map there. Goes out there, gets a nasty ground and pound finish, and then goes out there in the debut and gets a finish here. So what we've seen from Abdul-Maik is a guy that has a very extensive grappling background, right? He's a very high-level wrestler, and what he's blended in nicely is because what we've seen nowadays is just being this American-based wrestler that has outstanding wrestling isn't enough nowadays, right? You have to be able to add to that skill set, and that's been kind of a topic that a lot of people have been talking about in the MMA space right now, is you have to provide more than just going out there and trying to be a wrestler, and Abdul-Maik has done that. He has dangerous power in his hands. He is a very, very dangerous guy on the feet, and I think that's what this comes down to. Outside of a Hail Mary submission from Nick Klein, I just don't see how he wins this fight. I think Abdul-Maik manhandles him in the grappling. He's way stronger, way better of a grappler, and on the feet, he is, in my opinion, light years ahead of Nick Klein. And I think that the danger factor with Abdul-Maik is there for all 15 minutes through this fight. But I don't even think Nick Klein's going to make it out of the first round. I think Mansour is going to get right in his face. I think he's going to back him up against the fence, knowing that Nick Klein, basically his only shot is to win this fight by submission. I think Abdul-Maik comes into this smart. Maybe he utilizes the wrestling here and there, but I think he tries to keep this fight on the feet to land some of those big shots. Maybe he does take him down and try to keep him on bottom, land some nasty ground and pound. I think Mansour is able to go in there and get a first round finish. This is a big moment for him. Nick Klein coming off of the Contender Series. He's got good submissions, but I believe that Mansour's skill set will negate anything that Nick Klein brings to the table. I have Abdul-Maik by first round stoppage. Moving on. We have Ricky Simon versus Javid Basharat. Now, this is actually a more interesting fight than I think what some people might give it, right? Because I think with Javid Basharat, this is a guy that came on, him and his brother, right? They've kind of came onto the scene and I feel like they have kind of lost a little bit of the hype, right? I still think that they are very good fighters. They're very skilled, very well-rounded. But what we saw from Basharat since he's came into the UFC, right? He's shown us that he's skilled on the feet. He's got good technique. He's kind of, just floats around and just kind of plays that game where he's just touch, 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 and he can implement the grappling. He does have good submissions. Goes out there, wins a decision over Trevin Giles, beats Tony Gravely, goes out there and gets another decision win, because that has kind of been what we have seen from Basharat. We have seen some submissions in his career, but since he's been in the UFC, it's been a lot of decision wins. He's kind of picking and poking at guys and being able to keep them at the end of his strikes. Then he goes out there, and then we have the accidental groin kick to Henry. So there was, this there. And then he goes out there in his most recent outing, and this is what kind of, I think, threw up some flags for some people, some red flags toward the like, okay, he goes out there and he loses to Ayman Zahabi, where I didn't really hold this against Basharat that much, because I think Zahabi is Ariel Helwani, I think he is a very overlooked fighter. I think Zahabi's got a very good camp with Faraz over there. He's got good coaches in his corner. So they had a good game plan coming in against Basharat. And I think that Javid is one of those guys to where, again, doesn't have the most power. He's technical on the feet, has good submissions. But the reality is he's kind of been more on the sides of winning decisions recently, right? And he's going in there against a guy in Ricky Simón who is on a 3-fight skid, right? And prior to that, he went out there and he was able to get a finish over Rafael Sunsao. Goes out there and beats Jack Shore. So his last win was basically 2.5 years ago, right? And yes, it's very impressive, going out there beating Jack Shore. And then he goes out there and gets finished by Song Yadong, right? And again, Song Yadong, he's about as good as they get right now in the bantamweight division. He's an absolute savage. Goes out there and loses a decision to Mario Bautista, who, again, an up-and-coming prospect in the weight class. Then goes out there and loses a decision to Vinny Oliveira. How bad is this loss age, though, right? Because Vinny Oliveira just went out there and beat Said Nurmagomedov, right? So what we've seen from Oliveira, he looks like he's going to be a serious problem in the weight class. So when you look at that losing streak that we see there from Ricky Simón, how bad is it, realistically, right? And he's a guy that he kind of has that Merab Dvalishvili type of pace, right? Remember when he went out there against Merab, what he was able to do? He has the wrestling. And again, he's only 32 years old, right? People talk about Ricky Simón like he's 50, right? This guy's 32. I think he still has gas left in the tank. He has, the big overhands that he throws, which really is just to get to the takedowns, because Ricky comes into these fights knowing I have to shoot, and shoot. That is his game plan. Back you up. It's very much like a Merab type of fight, right? He goes out there, utilizes, the boxing to set up the takedowns, and he will continue to try, right? You're not going to deter Ricky Simón from shooting takedowns, right? And I do think what Javid brings to the table is going to be a little bit troubling for Ricky Simón, which is why I'm going to go Basharat by decision here. I think that he's able to get this one done. But again, it wouldn't surprise me if Ricky Simón goes out there and pulls off an upset here, because I believe that Ricky Simón has not lost it. He's been in there against some really good competition. He has a relentless style to where he will not fade over the course of the 3 rounds that these guys are going to be in there. So I think Javid is the more technical guy on the feet. I think that he will be able to outland Ricky Simón in terms of the striking. And if Ricky gets his hands locked and is able to take Basharat down, I don't see him holding Javid down. And I think in terms of if Ricky is going to try to go the grappling route, which we all know he is, Basharat has some slick submissions, man, and he can try to snatch a neck or try to advance positions and try to find a submission or something. So I think Basharat is going to be dangerous on the ground to where Ricky isn't just going to be able to have his way. And while he may take Basharat down, I don't see him taking him down and just controlling him the entire fight. So for that reason, I'm going to go Javid Basharat by decision. I think he outlands him on the feet. Again, doesn't have the most power, but I think he picks and pokes his way to a decision here. I have Javid Basharat. Moving on, we have Nursultan Ruziboev versus Eric McConico. Now, this is one of those fights that just popped on the card out of nowhere. These guys weren't supposed to be on this card. They got added at the last minute. And we have an interesting situation here because Eric McConico, he's making his UFC debut. And not only is he making his UFC debut, he's making it against a very, very skilled guy in Nursultan Ruziboev, who is coming off of a loss to Joaquin Buckley. To where, how is that age, though? Because Joaquin Buckley is an absolute problem down at welterweight. He's fast, he's got a good gas tank, he's got good grappling, and he's a very well-rounded guy down at welterweight. So I don't really think that that's a terrible loss for Ruziboev. And then again, Ruziboev, in my opinion, should have never been at welterweight. This guy is 6'5" with a 76-inch reach. To be 6'5", cutting down to 170, I don't know how he was making the weight. So I would like to think that that's something that was possibly impacting his performances, right? I'm not taking anything away from Buckley or anything like that. I'm just saying, I think that there's some truth to that, right? The weight cut, whenever you're that big, I think that that's a factor. But Nursultan Ruziboev is absolutely the better fighter here. McConico, he's a guy who's rattled off some decent wins, right? He's got some solid grappling. He's got some good submission skills. And that's what we've seen on the local pro scene. However, when you come into the UFC and you make a debut, it's a steep hill to climb, right? Especially if you're not coming off of the Contender Series to where we've seen you tested against someone who is basically on the edge of being UFC caliber. So we don't have that sample from Eric thus far, and he's going in there not against just some veteran who's been around, a very, very good fighter who's very dangerous in Nursultan Ruziboev, who has outstanding submissions. His wrestling it's kind of but he has very, very good submissions. Goes out there and, with a nasty finish over Bruno Ferreira, who is a very good fighter, goes out there and gets the finish over Cedricus Dumas, and then ultimately got halted there in the decision loss to Joaquin Buckley. But I think this fight is very straightforward. I think Nursultan Ruziboev is clearly the better fighter coming into this, and I expect him to get a finish here. I'm going to say a round 2 TKO. Now, Ruziboev, he strikes me as the kind of guy who's constantly in the gym, constantly working on his skills and constantly training, but he's kind of coming off the couch a little bit in a sense here. And I know Eric, he's kind of coming off the couch as well. I think he was preparing for a fight a little while back on the regional scene. So, opportunity presents itself. Eric steps in, but I think Nursultan Ruziboev, he's got those long rangey strikes. He's got good combinations. He throws those good straight shots down the middle, the front kick, the nasty right hand. I think that he is able to catch Eric on the feet, because Eric, I think that his best bet is to try to resort to the grappling. And I do think that he is he's a bigger guy, right? At 185 pounds. And I think him coming in, he's going to try to weaponize the grappling, because on the feet, he is not nearly as good as Ruziboev. Ruziboev is faster. He's more slick. So I think that he will try to take the fight, the fight to the floor. But the submission game of Ruziboev is I think, going to deter Eric from constantly looking to grapple. So I think the fight gets back to the feet. Ruziboev puts the pressure on him and is able to land a nasty shot on the feet. And again, say both of these guys are coming off the couch kind of like they are, I would definitely be banking on Ruziboev from what we have seen from him in the UFC thus far compared to what we have seen from Eric. Nothing in the UFC. I'm going Ruziboev here all day long, and I'm picking him by finish. Moving on. Very intriguing fight here at light heavyweight. We have Cutelaba versus Ibo Aslan. Now, this is a lot more interesting than I think some people might think here. Look, Ibo Aslan is an absolute animal. This guy is an absolute savage. And if you do not have an answer within the first minute, you're going to get knocked the hell out. And that's what we've seen from Ibo Aslan, even dating back to the regional scene. This guy just gets in people's faces and he lets those big ooga booga shots go, man. He says, forget about the technique, coach. I don't care about the pad work. I don't care how nice it looks. I'm coming in there and throwing those big haymakers. And he overwhelms guys. Gets in their face, does not give you an opportunity to get your feet under you and really feel the fight at all. And we saw that on the Contender Series. Goes out there and finishes Paul Hernandez Jr., then goes out there against Anton Turkalj, overwhelms him, gets him out of there. Goes in there against Rafael Cerqueira and goes out there, never gave him a shot, never gave him an opportunity. So what we have seen from Aslan is a very game opponent, very aggressive, and very, very exciting. And I like everything about this guy. I think that he wins this fight by finish. I'm going to go first round KO here. And I'm going out on a limb here because here's what I'm worried about. I know Ion Cutelaba is kind of a guy who he's got this, scary attitude back in the day. He was kind of this guy who's very intense, had these crazy face-offs. And he's just one of those dudes that he's game. He's always going to show up. He's not going to shy away from a dogfight. And he does have good grappling, right? But we just haven't seen him show signs of outstanding fight IQ. But we did see that a little bit in his most recent fight, getting the split decision over Aslan. But before that, goes out there, gets submitted by Johnny Walker. Goes out there, gets finished by Kennedy Nzechukwu. Goes out there, gets a finish over Tanner Bosser. And then goes out and loses to Felipe Lins. So it's kind of been a hot and cold Ion Cutelaba career. Remember in the Magomed Ankalaev fights to where he got absolutely starched in that one. So Cutelaba has shown that you just can't trust him, man. You can't trust him. And I do think that if he displays good fight IQ, he can absolutely derail the hype here with Aslan. If he doesn't engage in the striking and decides to mix in the grappling, take Aslan down, wear on him, make him tired, drag it into that second half of the second round, third round, to where you can, take away the explosiveness from Ibo Aslan. I just think even if you try to do that, Aslan is big, he's strong, he's powerful, and he is just very dangerous, and he is coming in with a ton of confidence right now. I like everything about Aslan. I think he's good for the division. He's dangerous. I like everything about him. I think he's able to get Cutelaba out of there in the first round. I'm going Ibo Aslan by first round finish. Moving on. We have Andre Fili versus Mel Costa. Now, this is a straightforward fight to me. And I think that when you look at this, look, Mel Costa, he's a guy that he's got slick submissions. He's rangy on the feet. He's, got pretty good movement. He's a very athletic guy. We've seen that. Goes out there, gets the finish over in LFA. Then he comes into the UFC, right? Faces his first little bit of adversity. Goes in there against Thiago Moises. That's a pretty hard fight, right? Thiago Moises is a solid opponent. Gets taken down, gets submitted. Then goes out there, wins a decision over Austin Lingo. Then he goes out there and gets finished by Steve Garcia, who's a solid opponent, goes out there and, gets the submission victory. But what we've seen from Mel Costa, he has good submissions. So is there a scenario to where he could possibly find a submission, find a shot on the feet? Sure. I think that a submission is a hell of a lot more likely than some sort of knockout. But I don't like what I've seen from Costa. I'm just being honest. I don't like what I've seen from him. I think he has good submissions, but I don't know how that's going to fare against a very, very skilled and well-rounded guy like Andre Fili. And Andre Fili, he's one of those dudes that has a skill set that just kind of wasted a little bit of potential, in my opinion, man. Like, he's a guy that he's such a well-rounded fighter. He's got good striking on the feet, pretty good boxing, solid kicks, good wrestling. And we saw that. We've seen that throughout his career. Gets the decision win over Bill Algeo and then goes out there, loses to Nathaniel Wood, beats Lucas Almeida by finish, gets finished by Dan Ige. Dan Ige's a savage. Goes out there and wins a split decision over Cub Swanson, which was a very, very close fight. But Cub Swanson, you just saw what he did to Billy Q, went out there and was able to starch him. So that's a pretty solid win. And what we've seen from Andre Fili, I just think he's the more well-rounded fighter. I think he's better on the feet. He's got better boxing. I think his striking overall is better. And I think that his wrestling will negate the submissions of Mel Costa, because I think that Andre Fili is going to dictate where this fight goes. If Mel Costa tries to take the fight to the floor, I think Andre Fili can utilize his wrestling, and he still has good submission skills as well. He has good jiu-jitsu. We don't get to see too much of it as of late, but I do think Andre Fili has a very solid overall ground game. I just think he's a better fighter, and I'm going to go Andre Fili by decision. I think he's able to outpoint Mel Costa here. I think that he mixes things up, mixes in the grappling, keeps the fight on the feet, which is where I think he should keep it. I think he's able to outland and outpoint Mel here. I got Andre Fili by decision. Moving on. We have an interesting light heavyweight fight between Alonzo Menifield and Julius Walker. I think this fight is a lot more interesting than one might expect. Listen, Alonzo Menifield is coming off of a very interesting two-fight stretch, right? We'll go back a few fights here. He goes out there, finishes Jimmy Crute by submission. That's Jimmy Crute, dog. That's Jimmy Crute, man. I don't think it's that impressive. Goes out there and is able to get a decision win over Dustin Jacoby. If Dustin Jacoby doesn't get wobbled by some of those big shots and doesn't get hit by some of those, huge shots that Menifield was throwing, Dustin Jacoby outpoints him and wins this fight, right? I know shoulda, woulda, coulda, but he was getting outstruck in that fight. I thought Jacoby was fighting a perfect fight until the big shot would land from Menifield, and then he would basically steal the round. So that's a little bit, I think that's important to note there. Goes out there, gets absolutely starched by Carlos Ulberg, decided to run out there and display some low fight IQ and just bull rush him, which I guess he was trying to catch a very technical Ulberg by surprise. Gets absolutely starched early on and then goes out there and takes an absolute beating from Azamat Murzakanov 6 months ago. And what we've seen from Alonzo Menifield, he's 15-5-1. He's been around for a while. He's 37 years of age. He is an absolute powerhouse to where if this fight stays on the feet, I believe Menifield goes out there and gets a finish. Absolutely. I think he is the more dangerous guy on the feet. But I'm willing to take a shot in the dark here, man. I'm willing to take a shot in the dark here because when I went back and I watched the tape on Julius Walker on the regional scene, this guy's got some pretty good grappling, man. I don't think he's outstanding on the feet. I think he's decent on the feet. And again, UFC competition is a little bit different, right? Goes out there, gets a submission here. But what we've seen from Julius Walker on the regional scene is a guy that does have good grappling. And I think that what he is able to do with his grappling is impressive. And I think coming into this fight against Alonzo Menifield, there's a very clear-cut path to victory. If he's able to go out there and take Alonzo Menifield down, avoid those big shots, I think he wins this fight. I think that he absolutely could go in there in his UFC debut and pull off an upset here because I see he's an underdog, and I'm going to go Julius Walker here. I think that he is able to find a submission in the second round against Alonzo Menifield. I know this might be shocking. I know, and I'm willing to go out on a little bit of a limb here because while, yes, Alonzo Menifield is coming off of 2 losses, they are two very, very good fighters in Azamat and Carlos Ulberg. But I believe that Julius Walker is fighting Alonzo at a perfect time because Alonzo, he's getting up there in age. He's coming off of 2 KO losses to where he got, destroyed in both of those fights. And I don't think Alonzo has the grappling to be able to match Julius Walker because Alonzo's a very physical guy, right? He's strong, he's a big dude. And I don't think that Julius is just going to be able to go in there and take him down very easily, especially early on. But if he can avoid those big winging power shots that Menifield throws, I think Julius Walker's a little bit more technical, and I think that his ground game is definitely better than Alonzo Menifield. So if he can avoid the big shots of Alonzo early, I think he can mix in some of the grappling and have a lot of success. And a lot of the guys grappling and the submission ability that Julius Walker presents, I think that he could go in there and pull off a big upset here against Alonzo Menifield, because I know a lot of people are just going to assume Alonzo Menifield goes out there, gets the KO, which of course is very possible because he's very dangerous and Julius is unproven in the UFC. But given what we've seen from Alonzo recently, and when fighters start to kind of have this dip and they're relying on, with Menifield, it's those big winging shots. I think if Walker comes in with a tactical game plan, he gets the fight to the floor and is able to find a submission. I'm going out on a limb here and saying Julius Walker pulls this one off and finds a submission. I'm going to go second round. Moving on, we're getting into the juicy ones here. We have Jean Silva versus Melsik Baghdasaryan. This is an outstanding matchup here made by the UFC because Jean Silva, this dude is an absolute savage. Fighting out of the Fighting Nerds camp, we know that they got a lab out there with the Fighting Nerds. They got these dudes, they're breeding fighters out there. They're like a little bit of jiu-jitsu, a little bit of striking, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I mean, these guys coming out of the Fighting Nerds camp are absolute savages. They have very good striking, very good jiu-jitsu, and a very well-rounded skill set, and they're all incredibly fun to watch, right? They all go out there and are all willing to lay it all on the line, and that's what we've seen from Jean Silva, right? Since he's been in the UFC, goes out there, gets the decision win on the Contender Series, and then since then, he has just been running through everyone. Goes out there and starches Wonder Boy's guy here, and Weston Wilson goes out there and viciously finishes Charles Jourdain, then goes out there up at 155 pounds and gets a finish stoppage over Drew Dober, which I thought this fight was incredibly impressive because Drew Dober, he's about as game as they get, man, at lightweight. He's a big guy. He's powerful. He's a very, very good striker. And Jean Silva just didn't care. Went right after him, got right in his face and started to let his hands fly. And I believe Jean Silva is that guy in this division on the rise, man. I think he is incredibly fun to watch. He's got a very, very fun personality. His walkout takes too damn long. Need to hurry his ass up to the octagon because it takes too long. But other than that, man, this dude is a savage. He's got big power in his hands. He has good submissions, good grappling in his back pocket if he needs to use it. But I think this is more of a striker's delight type of matchup because with Melsik Baghdasaryan, he has the very extensive kickboxing background, right? He's a guy that we haven't seen in quite some time, almost, over a year and a half here. Went out there and beat Tucker Lutz by decision, goes out there, loses to Josh Kulabau by submission. So again, if Jean Silva decides to take the path of least resistance and mixes in the grappling, I could see him having an even easier time with Baghdasaryan, but goes out there, gets the decision win over Bruno Souza. And just what we've seen from him is we know what we're getting. A very, very game guy on the feet, very good technique, good knees up the middle, good elbows, very good tie technique, and has some fast kicks, good hands. Melsik Baghdasaryan's the full package on the feet. The problem is, Jean Silva's just that guy, man. He's that guy, and I think that when it comes to the power, Baghdasaryan is outmatched. And Jean Silva, for being as powerful as he has very good output as well. So I am going to go Jean Silva by finish. I think that in the second round, he is able to find a big shot on Melsik. Because again, while Melsik may have this very pretty technical kickboxing style, I don't think that he is able to skate by over the course of 15 minutes and just pick and poke at Jean Silva and find his way to a decision. I just don't see that happening from what we have seen from Silva thus far. The power, the tenacity that we have seen, and the ferociousness from Jean Silva, I think that it is going to be too much for Melsik Baghdasaryan. But if Silva goes in there and he stands in front of Baghdasaryan, which I think he's going to do, of course anything can happen because Baghdasaryan is a very skilled striker on the feet. But if Silva mixes in the grappling, I think that he can cause even more issues for Baghdasaryan. But again, Melsik has pretty good takedown defense. He's not the easiest guy to hold down. We saw that in the Lutz fight. So I think that If Jean Silva goes in there, mixes it up, he makes it even easier. But if he just stands in front of Melsik like I think he's going to do, I think that he eats some shots, but eventually he lands a big right hand or something and is able to get him out of there. I'm going Jean Silva by second round KO. Moving on to the featured fight, we have Rob Font versus Jean Matsumoto. This is a very interesting fight here because Jean Matsumoto was supposed to be fighting at UFC 313 against Gutierrez, I believe. So that was going to be the first real big test of Matsumoto's career. And for Rob Font, he was supposed to be getting the, on the brink of retirement last fight in the career of Dominic Cruz. So this is quite the opponent change, right? You go from a guy in Dominic Cruz who's got this, weird style, all this footwork, one of the, greatest bantamweights of all time, a guy that, he just hasn't been very active and a little bit of a puzzle on the feet, to where now you have this young, up-and-coming, undefeated prospect in Jean Matsumoto, who he's been an absolute savage since getting to the UFC. Right on the local scene, he's got outstanding kicks. He's got very good Muay Thai technique, very good boxing, and just a very well-rounded skill set. He is good in all aspects. He's got good submissions, has good takedowns, and he is the full package. However, what we've seen from him, I know over in LFA, he got the submission here, gets on the Contender Series, is able to win by decision, goes out there, gets a submission over Dan Argueta, and then goes out there against Brad Katona, a little over 3 months ago. But look, that Brad Katona fight was a little bit of an eye-opener for me when it comes to Matsumoto. Look, the guy's 25 years of age. He's got a very well-rounded skill set. He's got good output. He has good power. He has a well-rounded skill set. This is one of those fights to where I think people are going to write off Rob Font, and you just can't do it. You just can't do it. Listen, I know Rob Font is almost 38 years of age. He's getting rocked a lot in his shots. He's going out there against Chito Vera, to where Rob Font was fighting pretty well, right, until he would get hit by a big head kick or something by Chito Vera that ultimately, lost him the fight. Goes out there against Adrian Yanez, who people are like, look, Adrian's the next big thing. He's got outstanding boxing. He's a fun guy to watch. And Rob Font says, okay, hold on, watch this. Put me on the main card in Miami. No big deal. I'm going to go out there and derail the hype train. Goes out there and makes easy work of Adrian Yanez. Put the jab in his face, started to let those uppercuts fly, and was able to get him out of there. Then he had the 2-fight skid. Goes out there against two of the top guys in the division in Corey Sandhagen, which again, if you just stand in front of Rob Font, it's not always the easiest thing to navigate because Rob Font doesn't have the best takedown defense. He's not the easiest guy to hold down because, again, he's fighting the best competition in the world. Goes out there, Corey Sandhagen is able to control him with the grappling. Goes out there and loses to Deiveson Figueiredo. But what was the path to victory for Corey Sandhagen? Weaponized the grappling. Deiveson Figueiredo mixed things together, but the speed of Deiveson Figueiredo, and considering how good Figgy is, that's the former flyweight champ man and one of the best flyweights that we've seen in quite some time. So Deiveson Figueiredo is an absolute savage. So two really good fights there. Goes out there against an up-and-coming guy in Kyler Phillips, who's a whirlwind on the feet, very athletic, very explosive, and was able to solve him and outpoint him to win a decision. I don't like this matchup for Jean Matsumoto here. I know Matsumoto was preparing for a fight, and now he's fighting quite a bit sooner than expected. But I think Rob Font, there's something to his style that gives these new guys a problem. And while Rob Font is not exactly who he used to be back in the day, he has a style that translates well to getting older. He doesn't rely on a ton of movement, a ton of in and out movement, a ton of this, a ton of that. He's very basic. He's got a good high guard. He's got a money jab. He's got a good right hand. He will throw the uppercuts. He's basically just a boxer in there. Doesn't throw a bunch of kicks. He's not the easiest guy to take down, but if you do take him down, you can control him. So I think if Matsumoto comes into this, mixes things together, he could win this fight. However, I'm going to side with the old head in this. I think Rob Font is able to outpoint Matsumoto to a decision. I think the jab, I think that the way that he is going to mix the boxing together is going to cause Matsumoto some problems. And look, Matsumoto could go in there and just be that damn good, right? From what we've seen from him, he's very well-rounded. He's very skilled. He's got the kicks. He has more of an arsenal to weaponize against Rob Font. But I believe that the boxing of Rob Font is significantly better than Matsumoto. I think he's going to tear him apart with the jab, and I think that this could be a little bit too much too soon for Matsumoto. I'm going with the underdog here, Rob Font, by decision. I could see a finish on the side of Rob Font if he's able to land a good shot like he did against Yanez. But again, Matsumoto's tough, he's durable, and I do expect him to try to mix everything together. So if Rob Font can defend the takedowns, get back to space, turn this into a boxing match, I think Rob Font is able to get this one done by decision. I'm riding with the underdog. Moving on to the co-main event of the evening, an outstanding clash at middleweight here between Brendan Allen and Fluffy Hernandez. Listen, this fight happened back in 2018. I believe it was in LFA. Prior to these guys getting to the UFC, these are two highly skilled guys when it comes to the submissions in this division. I mean, Anthony Hernandez has been on an absolute tear, guys. 13-2, and he's just been rattling off wins over some high-level competition recently. Goes out there and finishes Edmund Shabazian. We saw what Edmund just did against Dylan Butker, right? Edmund Shabazian is a very, very dangerous guy on the feet, so was able to take him down, finish him with some ground and pound. Goes out there and makes very light work of a dangerous striker in Roman Kopylov, right, who just went out there and was able to finish Chris Curtis. Went out there, took him down, mauled him, and got a submission. Goes out there against Michel Pereira and is able to finish him by ground and pound. If you're finishing Michel Pereira, especially at 185 to where the weight cut is not draining Michel, that is incredibly impressive. And what we've seen from Fluffy Hernandez is a guy with a relentless pace, relentless gas tank, unbelievable cardio. He's got some power in his hands, right? He's got, maybe not the best striking, but he blends it very, very well together with the pressure, with the cardio, and the takedown threat that he presents opens up the striking. And I think in this fight, that is exactly the difference in this matchup. While Brendan Allen, he was catching fire, right? Brendan Allen was looking like a real problem in the division. Goes out there, submits Andre Muniz, goes out there, submits Bruno Silva, goes out there, submits Paul Craig. I mean, he was on an absolute tear, and then goes out there and wins the close, controversial decision over Chris Curtis, then goes out there and loses to Nasruddin Imavov. But again, very good first round against Nasruddin. Was able to go out there, was able to take him down, control him a little bit. But Imavov is just showing that he is just that damn good, right? Coming off of that crazy KO over Israel Adesanya. So Imavov's just that good. So that loss that Allen just, took there, I don't think it's as bad of a loss as we originally thought, right? With Brendan Allen there. So this fight is very interesting because I think on the feet, Brendan Allen doesn't get the respect he deserves. I think that his striking has came a very long way. While I don't think he's a world beater in terms of the striking, I think his kicks have improved. I think that his boxing has improved, but I don't think it's good enough to deal with the pressure and the output that Anthony Hernandez is going to bring to the table. And I think that Fluffy Hernandez in this fight is able to win by decision, because if this was 5 rounds, I could see Fluffy Hernandez maybe finding a submission, but given the fact that it's a 15-minute fight, I could see Brendan Allen hanging in there and not getting submitted. But again, I could also see Fluffy Hernandez finding a submission in this because he has been on an absolute tear. He's got the pace. He can absolutely melt you with the pressure. And I think that he's going to crush the space, back Allen up against the fence, take him down, take his back, and maul him in terms of the grappling. But Brendan does have good submissions in all areas. So I do think that he can threaten with those to make Fluffy Hernandez cautious. But I think that the pace is what is going to win for Hernandez this fight. I think that the volume, the way that he is able to just take guys down, control them, maul them, threaten with submissions, I think Fluffy Hernandez gets this one done. I could see him getting a submission, but I ultimately think Brendan Allen's a hard guy to put away. I'm going to go Fluffy Hernandez by decision here. Moving on to the main event of the evening between Henry Cejudo and Song Yadong. Back in the day, if you would have booked this fight, if you take a prime Henry Cejudo and put him in there against Song Yadong, at this point in Song's career, I think it would be a very difficult fight for Henry Cejudo. And now, given that Henry is 38 years of age and he's going out there against a guy in Song at this point in his career, I just see this fight being an absolute disaster for Henry Cejudo. I mean, make no mistake about it, Henry Cejudo has already cemented his legacy. This guy is an unbelievable fighter, and what he's done in his career is absolutely spectacular. Winning a gold medal, coming into the UFC, becoming a 2-time champion in 2 weight classes, or, a 2-division champion, going out there and winning the flyweight title, going out there finishing TJ Dillashaw, going up and, defeating Dominic Cruz like we saw, and then again, goes out there and retires, which I thought was just a huge mistake on the side of Henry Cejudo. I think that he was hoping for a payday, hoping for the UFC to value him a little bit more. And the UFC said, man, we don't care about you, Henry Cejudo. So again, not a very good career decision from Henry Cejudo there. Takes some time away, comes back after a long layoff, finds himself in a title fight against Aljamain Sterling, one of the best bantamweights of all time, and loses a very, very, very close decision to Aljamain Sterling. I was very impressed from what we saw from Cejudo in that fight, considering the long layoff. Then he goes out there and gets ragdolled around by Merab Dvalishvili, despite landing a very good sharp left hook in the first round that definitely got Merab's attention. So Henry Cejudo's a skilled guy, right? He's got pretty good striking on the feet. He does have some good wrestling, but the problem with Henry is, yes, he does have outstanding wrestling. The guy won an Olympic gold medal, but in terms of MMA wrestling, it's not exactly this super scary thing like people make it out to be, and he doesn't have really good submissions. So when he takes people down, it's really to mix it together, keep you guessing, and to control you and win minutes. That's kind of what Henry Cejudo's grappling does. And I just don't see how he does that to Song Yadong over the course of 25 minutes, man. And I know that, yes, those losses don't look so bad considering how good Merab is and how good Aljo is. But when I look at Song Yadong, this is a very, very dangerous guy on the feet, going out there and fighting tooth and nail with Petr Yan, to where I was happy to see Yan get back in the win column. But Song fought a really good fight. He was able to have some really good moments against Petr Yan, goes out there and, wins against Chris Gutierrez, goes out there and finishes Ricky Simone. And what we've seen from him, he is a very, very, very dangerous fighter. He has really good boxing, big power in his hands, outstanding speed on the feet, and he does have good wrestling of his own. Now, is the wrestling as good as Henry Cejudo? Not straight wrestling, but in terms of MMA wrestling, I think it's pretty damn good. So if Cejudo's able to take Song down, I don't think that he's able to control him. Song's over there at Team Alpha Male. Those guys genuinely have pretty decent takedown defense. And when it comes to the boxing, they also have good boxing. We've seen that with Cody Garbrandt back when he was there. We've seen with Josh Emmett, a guy that's got good takedown defense, big power in his hands. That's kind of what Song brings to the table, but at a more diverse arsenal on the feet. He's got really, really good speed. He's got very, very good power. I see this being an absolute disaster for Henry Cejudo at 38 years of age. A prime Henry Cejudo, I don't even know if he would beat Song Yadong. And I know that might be a hot take, but I believe that. Song is that damn good, man. He's going out there and fighting to a close fight with Petr Yan, and that's showing how good Song is. And again, I know those two losses that Henry took they look a lot better considering what Merab has done and how good Aljo, how good of a fighter Aljo is. But I think the skill set that Song presents, while he doesn't have the grappling that those guys have, he is a lot more dangerous on the feet. And we haven't seen Henry, since he's kind of made this run at bantamweight that hasn't, worked out very well. He hasn't been in there with a very dangerous guy on the feet yet. And Song is that first opponent that he's running into here. A guy with really good speed with the boxing, very good power, very good combinations, and I think good enough grappling to cause some issues for Henry Cejudo, to where I don't think Henry could go out there and just take Song down a bunch of times and control him for large portions of the fight. And in terms of the striking, I think Henry's got a decent low kick. He has a good right hand, but I don't think that it's enough to beat Song right now. I think Song is, he's hitting his prime. He was just in there with Yan. This is a very, very good fighter. I think Song Yadong is able to win this fight by decision. I don't think he finishes Henry because Henry's got that big old head. He's durable. He's a tough guy to put away. But I do think that if Henry Cejudo comes in with the right game plan, I could see him maybe pulling this one off. But I just think at 38 years of age, given what we have seen from Song and what we've seen from Cejudo thus far, I'm riding with Song Yadong. I think he's able to win this fight by decision. But if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, comment your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss an upload. I would appreciate it. See you next time.